Hi there.
Good evening, Tamara. How you doing?
I'm fine, sweetie. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
Good. Well, how are things? Where are you? Chicago,
Yeah. I'm in Chicago, and you are in
California,
California.
near San
Yeah, no, I'm in Chicago, and all it's been doing is raining this week. I saw a real huge boat on Lake Michigan, and then I saw this guy with a robe and animals, like two animals of each kind.
Are you being
walking.
funny? Should I be worried?
I was wondering when you were going to say, oh, okay.
Right. Although we're getting to that, aren't we? If they don't
Yeah,
stop being stupid around here.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm doing well. Things are going well. Have you opened the bookstore back
Oh,
up?
yeah, we did. We opened last Friday and the 3 days went really well. I was very happy. And today, I'm going to do a special event for the influencers here, like the political people, congressmen, state assembly persons, the superintendent of schools and our school board, the city council,
Super.
mayor, just so they'll know I'm here. I mean,
There you go.
a lot of people know I'm here, but I really have a really nice store, and it's kind of unique in that all of the children's books are face forward. And so when you walk into the bookstore, you see books, you don't see spines,
Oh,
right?
beautiful. Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I've almost run out of, no, I have run out of space already because the place we moved from was really large. I had a really nice place because I have a gift shop as well. So I
Okay.
had to split them up. But and now I've already run out of room. So we have a few options. And like everyone said, it's a good problem to have that.
That's what I was going to say. I know it's
Yeah.
axiomatic, but it's a good problem.
Yeah. So, but at any rate, yeah, things are going well. One of the councilmen came by today, and he was just thrilled. He's our youngest Black city councilman, actually. So he wants to host an event here.
Oh, super.
Yeah, the party
And
that I'm talking
and you're
about.
what part of California?
I'm in Richmond. It's right across the bay from San Francisco.
Okay, very
Right near
good.
Oakland, right next door to
Okay.
Oakland.
Okay, beautiful. Okay. All right.
So I'm one of two Black bookstores in the San Francisco Bay Area. Yeah, Marcus
Including Oakland?
right. Yeah, the only other one is Marcus Bookstore. And actually, Jimless, the young man who was here today, he said, well, Marcus just lost a customer because you're in my backyard. Right. Hey, Carol, how are you? Carol? Oh, she's trying to get there. Hey, Tiffany.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you? Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I can. Carol, you're my, okay, there you go. Carol? Okay, I don't hear you, kiddo. You're probably trying to talk. Carol, you might have to use your phone for audio. That does happen sometimes. And if you're talking, I don't hear a word. Okay. Stephen, I'm actually sharing a spot with the Bay Area Girls Club. It used to be Girls Inc. And Tiffany is the president of the Girls Club. And she's also executive director until we hire a new executive director. So.
Right. How was your grand opening?
Huh?
I was saying, how was your grand opening? I love seeing the pictures.
Oh my gosh, you know what? It really was well. It really went well. A lot of people showed up. It was good. The entire weekend actually went really well. So
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm very happy. You know, people got to see, you know, a lot of folks who came had never been to the store up at Hilltop. So, and of course, they're happy I'm down here, so I'm closer to many of the neighborhood around here and closer to downtown. So they're very happy. Diblis came by today and he's just super excited.
Awesome. That's good.
Yeah. Hi, Carol. We got you now.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Carol.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to use my phone.
Oh, okay. There you go. There you go. Well,
Thank you for this wonderful invitation, Tamara.
oh, you're very welcome. I was really hoping for a crowd, but Diblis, when he came by, he said, you know what, today is the day. And I'm like, what? He said, do you know how many meetings are going on today? I'm like, and that's why I chose today, because I thought maybe that everyone would be finished with their meetings this month. And he's the president of the young, oh gosh, the Young Black Politicians or something like that. So I said, no, that's an important group. You be there. But at any rate, so it's okay. I recorded it. I will be recording it. And I'm just, I've sold quite a few of his books already. So I'm thinking that people just, they got the book and they're okay. So I do want you to know the book is sold well.
There you go. Well, let me tell you, Tamara, I did a session with Tattered Books in Colorado. And I think it was probably, 6 people, but it ended up being picked up by C-SPAN.
Oh,
So
see?
yeah, there you go. So we're going to do this as if C-SPAN is, especially if you post it, that they probably will pick it up. So
Okay.
all right.
I will post it. Thank you. So I will, what I was going to say to introduce you was because there was so much I was going to say, just Google him. Because oh my gosh, you've done a lot. You've been doing a lot and you're still doing a lot. Just the idea that the name of your book really draws a lot of attention, of course.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. You've been teaching business to Black children and Black students for a long time. Actually, you created that program at Harvard, right?
Well,
entrepreneurship.
I created a new course
Right.
at Harvard. I already had the entrepreneurship program, but I created a new course called Black Business Leaders and Entrepreneurship.
Okay, right. So it also said you joined the Steens Family Foundation. What are
Yeah,
they?
the Staines Family Foundation is in Chicago. It's a foundation that's created by a very wealthy white family who has made an investment in the North Lawndale community of Chicago, which is about 4 miles west of downtown Chicago. And it's a community that is 99% Black. 50% of the households have annual incomes of $25,000 or less. And this community is just 4 miles west of Chicago. So I've been hired by the Staines Foundation to be a part of an economic development plan for this predominantly Black impoverished community.
Wow. Oh, wow. Okay. So people need to follow their lead, actually, on how
There
they're
you go.
teaching. Yeah, no, that's good. Like I said, the name of the book draws a lot of attention just because. And can you imagine how many people would love to write a letter to their white friends and colleagues, but now they can just send the book.
There you go, right there. Well, it's very personalized to say, this is a letter to you, and I'm hopeful that you'll be responsive. As I've said before, the book is written and the title focuses on, quite frankly, those white folks who have a kind heart, those white folks who have a logical mind, who are amenable to learning the truth about what happened to Black people and why we're in the position that we're in today, versus someone who is just automatically unwilling to learn the realities. And, the premise of my book is that over 50% of the problems that we see between Blacks and whites in America, over 50% of that problem comes from the wealth disparity. where whites have a wealth on average of about $170,000 compared to $17,000 for the average Black family. So it's 10 times greater for the white family. And the book points out that we as Black people, we can't pull ourselves out of this economic malaise by ourselves. And the reason why we can't, even if everybody spent all of their money with Black-owned businesses, everybody saved money at Black banks, we're just we're just financially too far behind to catch up. And the reason for that is because the federal government and the state governments did everything that they could to intentionally enrich whites, while they also at the same time simultaneously design programs to impoverish Blacks. They were not just simply mean to Black people. The actions that were done to Black people were very intentional for the purpose of basically bankrupting us, which we are presently today, whereas about 35% of all Black people have zero net worth. And all of this happened intentionally by the federal government sanctioning slavery, by the state governments sanctioning Black codes, and then the federal government sanctioning redlining. So these things were done, in essence, Tamara, sort of a socialist program for whites. And it was done intentionally to make sure that we were financially in the position that we're in today. So one could argue that the reality is that Black people and our economic circumstances is exactly what the government wanted us to be in. And so the book is written with that in mind, to educate the readers, predominantly white people, about what happened to us. We're not a bad people. We're not a people who won't work. We're not a people who won't save. We just were actually punished by the federal and state governments financially, resulting in where we are today. I'll close with this. And as the book states, if whites stopped amassing wealth right now, and Blacks continue to amass wealth at the rate that we are amassing wealth, it would take us 225 years to catch up. And when I said earlier, we just can't catch up, we don't have the ability because whites got a head start of 246 years of free labor. And all of that was done not to be mean to us, but to enrich them. So the letter to my white friends, yes, it's a letter, but it's also a book chock full of research, data, analysis, facts, as well as anecdotes.
So can I say something?
Go ahead.
Tomorrow, okay. So Professor Rogers, I hear what you're saying, and just yesterday I experienced a phase of what you're talking about. As a nonprofit, I was told yesterday that the school district, Clark County School District, is no longer allowing outside vendors to partner with their after-school program. And so I'm thinking, well, that's totally against what the name of the program, 21st Century CCLC, is Community Learning Center. And when I began directing an after-school program in 2005 through 2014, that partnership was being encouraged. Now all of a sudden that has changed, and that is always what happens. The rules of the game keep changing, and we just are continue to be left further and further behind.
Right. And the foundation of those changes typically have historically had the foundation in wealth creation for others and wealth denial for others. And the denial of the latter has always historically been Black people.
Yeah.
So just because, if I can, let me recommend, because in terms of process, can we go through a process where Tamara and I sort of have our interview, and then we're going to open it up for questions after that?
Oh,
okay.
Sure. I'm sorry. Yes.
And if everybody can, just so that we can make sure that the sound doesn't get affected, can everybody go on mute other than Tamara and me? because it does affect the bandwidth.
Okay, thank you. Actually, my questions are going to be totally your chapter heading,
Good,
because that was very interesting, the chapter, the heading. So the first one is, the best one is, why should we trust your advice? It's like, but obviously, just from the small conversation we've had so far, you've obviously done your homework. So, but if you were to answer that, I'm sure white folks would like to know, okay, so what makes you so smart? Well,
right, right.
yeah,
Well,
and who
well,
you are also.
right. Just some background information about myself. I am from the South Side of Chicago, predominantly Black community. I was born and raised on the South Side. I'm also a retired professor from Harvard Business School, where I taught entrepreneurial finance, and I created a new course titled Black Business Leaders and Entrepreneurship. I went to a small liberal arts college called Williams College in the eastern part of Massachusetts, where I majored in history with a concentration in Black history. So I know the combination of business as well as history, and I've combined the two of those in this book. I define myself as a race man. And a race man in the old school vernacular means a person, specifically, typically a Black person, who is completely devoted to the uplifting of the Black community. And that's how my life is defined, and I define how I go forward. And everything that I've done so far in my life, most of the things have focused on improving the Black community. So I give recommendations in my book that how whites can help the Black community. And these recommendations are all things that I've done myself. So my life has been devoted to helping Black people. I serve on the board of Fortune 500 companies. When I go into the boardroom, I always say the Black community comes into the boardroom with me. In my boardrooms, I have always been a spokesperson for the inclusion of Black suppliers, Black employees, the inclusion of Black folks. Every walk of life that I travel in, my focus is on how do we make sure that Blacks are included. And it has been my actions that I've taken at Harvard Business School, that I've taken in the boardrooms, and I've taken as an owner of a company, 3 companies myself. So you can trust me because my life has been devoted to this, and that is the improvement of the Black community. It's primarily been devoted through my support of Black entrepreneurship. After I retired in 2019, I decided I wanted to help Black students get the same kind of educational information that white students were clamoring for at Harvard Business School and other graduate business schools. So I did a tour of 10 HBCUs. I was going to do 12, but the COVID hit, and I taught a course on a workshop on entrepreneurial finance for Black entrepreneurs. And the reason why I focused on that, and after I retired, I came back to Chicago and taught Black entrepreneurs the same topic. And the reason I focus on that is because I know that Black business owners are the largest employers of Black people in the country, private employers. The federal government is the largest. So Tamara, you can trust me because this is something that I've done all of my life. I'm 64 years old, but as I stated earlier, my major in college was Black history. And I've walked the talk all of my life. I have the 4 things that I recommend. I recommend that whites put money in Black-owned banks. I've done that. I recommend that whites do business with Black-owned businesses. I do that. Probably over 50% of my annual budget goes to spend with Black-owned businesses, and not just with businesses that have Black employees, but Black-owned companies. So, my dermatologist firm is a Black-owned company. My law firm is a Black-owned company. My accounting firm is a female Black-owned company. So I've walked the talk in terms of those 2. The third recommendation is that I ask white people to make donations to historically Black colleges and universities. My philanthropic donations, 99% of my philanthropic donations every year, and I believe in tithing via what I get, at least on an annualized basis, at least 10% will be donated someplace. And all of that is donated to Black organizations. And so HBCUs are part of that. My two favorite schools are Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, and Bennett College in North Carolina, which is an all-girls, all-women's school. And we can talk about that later. And then finally, I encourage whites to support reparations. And I am a strong advocate of reparations for Black people, that the federal government should actually provide a check to Black people to compensate us for those 246 years of enslavement, followed by 60 years of Black codes, followed by 40 years of redlining. So my background is one where I've walked the talk. I have done well as a professor, winning Professor of the Year 26 times when I was at Kellogg. And my background is in finance. So I meld finance and the history of Black people together to come up with this book, and therefore to say, you can trust me. Somebody asked one time, well, who is he? Is he some civil rights leader? Is he some, community organizer? I said, no, I'm a Black businessman who loves the Black community. And I know the history of this country and how we got to the financial circumstances that we've gotten to.
Do you think that how white people support communities depend on the size of the community? Like, Richmond, we're really small compared to, let's say, San Francisco or Los Angeles. So would you recommend that the white community support in a certain way? I mean,
yeah,
is there a formula for that?
Right. Well, I think that we should expect whites to support Black communities without regard to the size of the Black community, be they small, be they large. And very specifically, this is what I asked for to you in terms of your question. I specifically asked for whites to donate, for example, at least 9.29% of their annual philanthropic dollars to HBCUs. Why 9.29%? Well, that represents the 9 minutes and 29 seconds that Officer Chauvin had his knee on George Floyd's neck. So I say on an annualized basis, 9.29% to historically Black colleges and universities. And also, I asked them to spend at least 9.29% of their annual budget with Black-owned businesses. So if it's a Black-owned business in a small community, 9.29% of that to that, and I'm talking about the minimum. Clearly, there's no ceiling, but be they small communities or large communities, I have a devotion to my community, Inglewood, where I was born and raised, a Black community that only has about 35,000 people. And when I came from retirement, that's the first place I went to create a program for Black entrepreneurs. So I'm asking whites to do 9.29% of their annual budget with Black-owned businesses. And the reason is because Black-owned businesses are the largest employers of Black people, as I stated. So when you give money and do business with Black-owned businesses like yours, you're helping the Black community. I finally asked for them to deposit at least 9.29% of their annual savings in a Black-owned bank. And the reason is because Black-owned banks will actually send money to the Black community. We know from research that 70% of mortgages given by Black-owned banks go to Black people, whereas less than 1% of mortgages by white-owned banks go to Black people. So the more money that can be funneled into the Black-owned banks, the more money goes into our community as a result of that. So that's sort of the formula that I'm asking people to apply, and that is a minimum of 9.29%.
Oh, okay. So what's been the reaction of your white friends and colleagues?
Yeah. That's a great question. The reaction has been extraordinarily positive. I have done podcasts, I've done interviews with my alma mater, and the response has been outstanding. When I sit on board of directors, and this time last year, when everything was at the height of on the verge of explosion in the country. I remember giving a speech at my board of directors meetings. 99% of the audience were white Republicans who were board members with me on my Fortune 500 companies. And the title of my speech was, how did we get into this mess and what can we do? And in essence, it was a precursor to my book. And that is, we got into this mess because the federal government did this to Black people. And what we can do is we could put money in Black-owned banks, do business with Black-owned businesses, support HBCUs, and support reparations. So one company, for example, as soon as I got and said, I recommend that we put money in Black-owned banks, he leaned over and told the CFO, let's put $250,000 in a Black-owned bank right now, tomorrow. And the 250 was because that's the maximum amount of money that can be put into a savings account that is guaranteed by the federal government. But he said, we're going to put 10 times that in the bank, but let's just make sure that tomorrow we put that 250,000. So the response has been enormously positive by my white friends. And those who have responded positively. There's also been those who have not responded. And I'm perfectly fine with that. As I stated at the beginning of this, I am not trying to convert anybody. I would love to, but that is not my objective. That can be a Herculean task. I want to help those who are interested in helping the Black community. I want to arm them with a method and a process for actually helping. Because, you know, Tamara, one of the things that happened after George Floyd's murder was white people were asking Black people, their friends, what can I do to help? And many Black folks were exasperated. They were annoyed. They were pissed. And some of them responded, don't ask me. I didn't create this problem. You did. And I'm a professor. I teach. And I viewed that as a missed opportunity. And it was a teachable moment. And I understand why Black people felt that way. But I felt that when we got a chance to have allies, we need to bring them into the fold. And we need to bring them in the fold with something concrete in mind. I don't believe in telling them, we want you to be anti-racist. No, I want to put practical things in their toolbox. And that is, the theme of my book is, I need you to share your wealth. And I need you to share your wealth by doing business with Black-owned businesses, putting money in Black-owned banks, and supporting HBCUs and supporting reparations. I need you to actually do these things. And I think it's a missed opportunity when we don't give specific directions. And my example and my model for that was Malcolm X. And Malcolm X, you know, he was giving speeches throughout the country at universities. And after one speech, one young white woman came up to him and said, Malcolm, what can I do to help? And his response was nothing. And he said later on, he regretted saying that because it was a missed opportunity. And it was a missed opportunity to get somebody white possibly to help him talk to their own people about doing right by the Black community. So that's the message that I'm giving. I have received nothing but positive feedback from it. The company who's the publisher of my book, they have enacted some of the things that I've recommended as well. And it has been very positive in terms of feedback, not just pats on the back, but practical people sort of almost coming up to me, or they send me an email. Here's my new bank account that I've opened. And they, you know, and I tell them, good, there you go. Now you're doing something, okay?
It's a feel good. I think it's a learning opportunity for everyone, but I think it's important for people to hear how they can help. A quote from the book, it says, the absence of banks in the Black community is akin to the canary in the coal mine.
There you
The
go.
death of the canary signifies that there is human danger due to a lack of oxygen in the area. Black communities without banks are also starved of metaphorical oxygen in the mines of financial resources needed for people to live healthy lives. You want to
There you go.
expound on that a little bit more?
Well, the reality is, unfortunately, because we are a poor race, and W.E.B. Du Bois, the great scholar, he said, it's really tough to be a poor man or a poor woman. He said it's even worse to be a poor race. And we're a poor race. I've cited the fact that 35% of us have zero net worth. And if you go to our communities, you see that reflective in the absence of private enterprise in our communities. Our communities are chock full of social service organizations, which we do desperately need. But the reality is the absence of private enterprise in our communities, which includes a bank typically at the foundation of that, the absence of private enterprise is a great sign that this community is not healthy financially. And so when you don't see a bank in the community, what that means is there's no money that's going out to people. At the best, what you see is money that is being taken from the community that's going to banks outside. A great example of this was in New York. New York, everybody thinks so highly of, but New York, up until like 1968, didn't have a black bank. All they had were black branches. All they had were branches of banks, white banks. And in New York, the white banks would have branches in Harlem, and they would take money from the community in the form of deposits, and then they would take that money and send the money in armored trucks that same day, take that cash and send it to Midtown, to downtown. They would never loan any money to Black people in the community. And the absence of a bank in the community is a sign that something is not right and it's not healthy, because a community cannot prosper without capital. You know, that's been one of the challenges that we have as Black people in a capitalist system, and that is we don't have capital. And the capital providers are the banks. Let me give you a close with this one. In the 1930s, after the Second World War, the federal government made the decision that we want to create a middle class in America. At that time, there was no middle class in America. There was no such thing as a 30-year mortgage. All mortgages were like 5 years or less. So the only people who had mortgages were very wealthy people. So with the New Deal, the federal government said, we want to create a new middle class. We want most of Americans not to be poor, not to be rich. We want them to be right there in that middle. So the federal government created the Federal Housing Authority Administration, FHA. And they said with the FHA, with the creation of that, what we're going to do is we're going to help people buy homes, because we know that the foundation for wealth creation is home ownership. So they said most people can't afford a 5-year mortgage. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the banks. The federal government said this. We're going to go to the banks and we're going to tell the banks, if you give a mortgage to people that's 30 years, we're going to guarantee 90% of that mortgage. Therefore, the bank could take this new financing and they could provide mortgages to people without great risk. And the result of that change was that the suburbs were created. And the suburbs were created, and the first suburb that was created was in Levittown, New York, outside of New York City. And it was created by the Levitt family. And they built 17,000 homes by going to a bank. Again, the importance of that bank and the absence of that bank being sort of a sign of canary. They went to the bank and they said, can you give me a loan to develop 17,000 homes? The bank went to the federal government and got approval by the federal government. The federal government said, yes, you give them that development loan, we'll guarantee 90% of it. So the result was the Levitt family was able to develop 17,000 homes by money that came from a bank. And that money came from a bank because the bank knew that the federal government was guaranteeing it. And those 17,000 homes were sold only to whites. In fact, the federal government very explicitly said, no, none of these homes can be sold to Negroes, okay? And at the same time, so what you had was, you had this whole community of Levittown that ended up being developed. And a lot of the white GIs that came from the war, they were able to buy these homes for as little as $800. Today, these homes are worth north of $500,000. But Black GIs could not buy it. Black banks could not participate in the mortgage guaranteed program either. And what we know is, we know that mortgages are one of the bank's most profitable securities. And so if you can't provide mortgages because the federal government refused to support it, then Black banks were denied the opportunity to enrich themselves as well as to enrich the Black community. Let me give you a couple of other quick examples, and that is when Levittown was created, there was an effort on the part of a co-op of 400 families in California to do the same thing right outside of Stanford University. And this family of 400, this cooperative of 400 families was comprised of 3 Black families. So these 400 families got together and they said, we want to do in California exactly what the Levitt family did in New York. We want to build and develop houses. They bought land right outside of Stanford University. And they went to a bank and they said to the bank, can you give us a development loan so we can build houses here? The bank went to, and it was a white bank, the bank went to the federal government to ask for that 90% guarantee. The federal government said no. And the reason why the federal government said no was because those 400 families, 3 of them were Black families. And the federal government said, you have 3 Black families. So no, 3 Negroes. So the cooperative of 400 families, they got together and they said, and they made a proposal to the federal government. They said, what if we guarantee you that no more than 3 Black families will be here? The federal government still said, no, we will not guarantee those loans, that development loan. The result was the cooperative had to sell that land. They sold it to a white developer who agreed with the federal government and only built houses that were occupied by whites. And the result was Blacks, the land right outside of Stanford University was never developed with the inclusion of Black people. But all of that was done with banks. And we see the same with the PPP program, where the federal government sent money to businesses. They sent money through banks. So if you don't have banks in your community, that's a distribution channel that has been denied to you. And I'll close with this one, and that is, sometimes people will say, what is it about Blacks? Why can't Blacks pull themselves up like the Irish did, like the Italians did? People discriminated against them. But the truth of the matter is, Tamara, the federal government never discriminated against them. There were never any laws that said you could not receive a mortgage guarantee because you're Italian. You could not receive a mortgage guarantee because you're Irish. In fact, the Bank of Italy, after the federal government created the FHA program, the Bank of Italy flooded the Italian community with mortgages because the Bank of Italy was created to help the Italian community. It flooded the Italian community with mortgages that were federally guaranteed by the government. As I stated earlier, mortgages are one of the most profitable securities that a bank can be involved with. The result is the Bank of Italy today has morphed into the Bank of America, okay? And so we don't have a story like that with Black banks. And the reason is because literally the federal government refused to provide opportunities for Black banks to do for the Black community what white banks did for the white community. As you well know, the federal government, they rated communities A, B, C, or D. An A community was a community that they viewed as very low risk, predominantly white community. A D community was a community that was occupied by Negroes or close to Negroes. And the federal government literally drew lines around Black communities and said, they drew red lines around them. And they said, we're not going to provide mortgage guarantees to anybody who lives in these communities or who are descendants of people who live in these communities. Those were Black communities. And that's why it's called redlining, because the federal government literally drew a red line around those homes. And the result was this: Black people couldn't get mortgages because the only mortgage they can get is like a 5-year mortgage. The bank wouldn't give people that. And so they couldn't get 30-year mortgages. So Black people were desirous of owning homes. So they went to the gray market. And there was a gray market created because banks would not provide mortgages to Black people. And that gray market was one called contract selling, where whites, for the most part, would buy homes in Black communities and then they would sell it to Black people for up to 32 times what they paid for it. Okay, so they would sell it to Black people on time. They would give Black people and tell them, you can pay me X amount of dollars a month. And the interest rate that they charged was at least twice as much as what they could have gotten had they gone to a bank for the mortgage. And what we know today is, the other thing is, for example, if you were to own a home today and you owned it for 26 years and you defaulted on your mortgage today, the bank would get your home, they would sell it, and then they would just take the money that they are the balance due for the mortgage that they gave. And they would give you the other part, the amount of money that you put in over 26 years. If you got a mortgage or a home from contract selling, if you missed a payment, you got nothing back. So Black families were saddled with this gray market. And the result was this, that research shows that the average Black family ended up paying, in today's dollars, $500 extra a month for their mortgage because interest rates were higher. Over the duration of the mortgage, they ended up paying $71,000 extra for their home versus what they would have paid had the banks just given them a mortgage. My grandparents were victims of that. My grandfather worked at a steel mill, great job, but he couldn't get a mortgage because he was Black. So they bought the contract, they bought the home on contract. 85% of Black people in Chicago in the 1950s bought their home this way. So the absence of a bank will devastate a community. And that is the real sign of the health of a community. It's not a surprise. If you go to very affluent communities, they're loaded with banks, okay? Or branches of banks. So that's the reason why.
Wow. Well,
And let me just say this, all the things that I just said are in the book.
right, okay. Well, thank you, because you have touched on much of what I was gonna ask. Anyway, does anyone have any questions? I did want to ask this. What do you think it would be if we had another Black Wall Street?
Well, you know, my objective in life is to create Black Wall Streets throughout the country. You asked me about the Staines Foundation and the work that I'm doing. That is exactly what we're doing. In fact, the name of our project is Tulsa 1920.
Oh.
And what we're looking to do is we want to take this Black community that is poverty stricken and we want to flood it with Black-owned businesses.
Okay.
And the Black-owned businesses that we're looking to flood it with are not startups, but what we want is we want somebody like you who has great experience. We want you to open another store in that community.
Okay.
And if you do that, we'll give you free rent for 20 years. Okay? So the whole idea and the reason for this is this. What we know from research is Black-owned companies, as I stated earlier, will hire Black people. We also know that white-owned companies will not hire Black people. Even white-owned companies in Black communities will not necessarily hire Black people. But we know that Black-owned companies, even if they're not in Black communities, will do it. That's research done by a white scholar by the name of Dr. Timothy Bates in a book called Banking on Black Enterprise. So we desperately need more Black-owned businesses, and we need them to grow because 94% of Black-owned businesses have no employees, and 94% of them have revenue of $50,000 or less. And what we know is from research, we know the threshold for profitability for a business is about $250,000. So what we need Black-owned businesses to grow. We need an effort to get 50% of Black-owned businesses to the revenue level of at least $250,000. And because also it's the threshold for business profitability, but it's also the threshold for when a business will hire their first employee.
Yes.
So the whole idea and the notion behind a Black Wall Street, we desperately need it. We need to embrace it. And one of the most tragic aspects of Black Wall Street is if you go to Tulsa, Oklahoma now, it doesn't exist.
Right.
That white people actually own all of the real estate for the most part on Greenwood Avenue. And there's a few Black businesses there, and the Black businesses there are challenged because the rents are so doggone high. The gentrification has hurt. But we desperately need more Black-owned businesses.
That would be wonderful. Do you think, has there been a real good uptick in Black-owned businesses in the last 5-10 years, you think?
Well, there
Success.
has been a great growth in Black-owned businesses, especially with Black female-owned businesses. That's been the fastest and the largest growth of all business owners. The problem is 98% of those Black female businesses have revenues of $50,000 or less. Okay. Now, over the last year and a half with COVID, Black-owned businesses have suffered. Over 40% of Black-owned businesses have closed and will not reopen. But I'm very optimistic though. I'm seeing, as I drive around communities, and it's just anecdotal evidence now, but I'm seeing new Black-owned businesses opening up. And so I'm hopeful that we see a resurgence of Black-owned businesses and new Black entrepreneurs getting back into business. Well, we lost 4 out of 10 Black-owned businesses as a result of COVID.
Oh, wow, that's horrible. Okay, do any of you young ladies have any questions for Professor Rogers? Do we still call you Professor Rogers?
6 half dozen, whichever you're comfortable with.
Okay, any questions?
Hi, my name is Jasmine Ortiz, and I put a question in the chat.
I'm sorry.
I live in Richmond, California. I work for 2 nonprofits, one Lincoln Families as a bilingual clinician and trauma social worker for immigration, the complete opposite of what Trump tried to do or was trying to do. I just wanted to say I appreciate you, Ms. Tamra, for all you do for the community. And what, excuse my lack of knowledge, but I'm from originally the Bronx, New York, but what Black-owned banks are in Richmond, the area I live in? I really want to know.
Oh, really?
I really want to know. And also I appreciate everything you said. I was writing notes in my journal.
I saw you.
And I want to purchase your book.
Please do, so that my children,
store.
please do. Let me just tell you this in terms of Black-owned banks. It's a very sad story. There's only 21 Black-owned banks in the country today. Black-owned banks got devastated during the 2012 crisis when banks were being saved. There's only 21 Black-owned banks. And Black-owned banks actually now are getting deposits being made to them. I just saw Wells Fargo, which has raped the Black community in the past with those mortgages during the crisis in 2011. But Wells Fargo just announced that they're putting millions of dollars in 3 Black-owned banks. But this is a story of Black-owned banks, and that is Black-owned banks have historically relied on Black people as depositors. And if you're a poor race where 1/3 of your community has 0 net worth, then when people do make deposits in the Black banks, for the most part, they're very small deposits, and they take the money out because they need to live. And so the result is a bank incurs higher expenses because the money is not left in the bank. That's why I've recommended to my white friends that they open a bank account with a Black-owned bank, and they deposit at least up to $250,000, and they can do it in 10 different bank accounts because $250,000 is the limit that the federal government will guarantee. So if the bank itself went into default, was closed, you're not going to lose a penny up to $250,000. So you just open, if you wanted to put 2.5 million in, you open 10 different accounts. And this is what I'm asking not-for-profit organizations to do, as well as corporations to do as well. And what that does is, and then I'm asking people, leave the money there for 3 to 5 years. Don't take it out. And the reason is because the way that banks work is like this. Banks actually create money from nothing, from magic. And I cite this in the book. So for example, Ms. Ortiz, you put $100 in your bank account, whatever bank it is. What will happen is that bank will take $10 and keep it, and then they'll do what's called fractional lending. they'll loan the other $90 out. And they loan the other $90 out to Tiffany. Tiffany gets that other $90 and puts it in her bank. Now be mindful, what has just happened? From your $100, there's now $190, okay? Because your $100 is still in the bank account, right? Tiffany now has $90 in a new bank account. That's $190. So that's the magic of the money multiplier that happens when people leave money in a bank account. It allows Black banks to actually make more money for their constituents, okay? So there's probably not a Black-owned, not probably, there's not a Black-owned bank in Richmond. There's only 21 throughout the country. In your home state, New York, there's a publicly owned Black-owned bank called Carver. And, you know, in today's world, we don't physically need to be, to touch brick and mortar to open an account at a Black-owned banks. We can do it online. And my book identifies 100% of all the Black-owned banks in the country and tells you how to contact them.
I bank with One United. Tiffany does too, she said. I found them actually through Carol, I think, who had to leave. She said to tell you she has 1,000 questions. She wants me to invite you back. She said she had so many questions. She really enjoyed you, but she had another engagement. But yeah, I bank with them online. And Tiffany said they're in Los Angeles. I know there was a Black bank in Los Angeles.
Absolutely.
So that's them. Okay. So yeah, I do bank with them. I was so happy to see that there was a Black bank that I didn't, like you said, I didn't have to go to. I thought they were trying to do one in Oakland at one time, but I don't remember now. I'm not sure, but at any rate, yeah, they're a pretty big bank, if I understand correctly, One United.
Right. Well, you know, Netflix has made major deposits in Black-owned banks.
Okay.
There's sort of it's kind of interesting. The banks need more deposits, but the bank also has to have more equity investors, because you just can't a bank can't have more deposit. There's a ratio that banks have to meet in terms of equity ratio relative to their deposits. So what Wells Fargo did, instead of putting money in a Black-owned bank, they actually invested money in Black banks that allowed them to be able to accept more deposits. So we need both of those. And, you know, as I mentioned, Netflix has stepped up to the plate. As I've cited in terms of HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, and I mentioned them because, you know, those are schools that, it's 101 schools. They teach 300,000 Black students. 75% of the students come from impoverished families, financially impoverished families. 75% of students at HBCUs receive Pell Grants. To receive a Pell Grant, $25,000 is the maximum amount of money that your household and your family could earn. And that's compared to less than 30% of students at white banks, white universities. But historically, Black colleges, like Black banks, were created because Blacks were denied admission to white colleges, despite the fact we were taxpayers paying the taxes for many of these public schools. And the same happened with Black-owned banks. They were created because whites would not give loans to Black people. But HBCUs, they are schools that deserve a special award because the average endowment of an HBCU is only $12 million. And, you know, HBCUs have produced, listen to these statistics, 80% of all Black judges today attended an HBCU. 50% of all Black lawyers today attended an HBCU. 50% of all Black doctors attended an HBCU. 40% of all Black engineers attended an HBCU. So we know, for example, the importance of HBCUs historically. Dr. King attended an HBCU. Thurgood Marshall attended Lincoln University and HBCU. Langston Hughes attended Lincoln University and HBCU. That's in the past, but today we see its relevance today in the form of one vice president of the country attending an HBCU. And therefore, if HBCUs did not exist today, I opine that 50% of Black, those 300,000 Black students probably would not be in college, because predominantly white universities don't want to be saddled with poor Black students that have that magnitude. So HBCUs have very important relevance to us today. And one of the best investors donators to an HBCU is Mackenzie Scott. Her husband is not worth a damn, Jeff Bezos, but Mackenzie Scott, she donated over $520 million last year to HBCUs. And that's what I'm asking whites to do in the book. And I'm saying, your forefathers and foremothers did these things. Most HBCUs were actually founded by white people. You know, Spelman College, all female school. Spelman is named after the Rockefellers' daughter, okay? Morehouse College, named after the secretary of a white religious organization that founded the school. And the secretary's name was Morehouse. But most HBCUs were actually founded by white folks. And I'm asking white folks to step up again and do things that their forefathers did and share their wealth.
Wow. Well, this is a type of conversation that could go on forever. I mean, it's just so much to say, so much to learn, but you've shared a lot. And is it okay to share this also? I've recorded it. Is it okay to share it? Because what I want to do is post it, because I'm sure people really wanted to hear what you had to say, which was, oh my gosh, I can't
Please.
thank you enough. Yeah, I mean, I've
Yes.
learned some things I didn't know, some things I thought I knew and didn't know. So I'm really grateful for you doing this. And I would love maybe next 6 months or so for us to do this again.
Reach back out to me. Reach
I
back out.
will.
You know, just so the audience knows, when my book, it came out on the anniversary of George Floyd's death, May 25th, I reached out to 100 Black-owned bookstores throughout the country. And I sent an email saying, if you're interested, I would love to do a book interview, virtual book interview. And one of the first to respond was Tamara. And she responded affirmatively. And she responded before she even know, for next week, I'll be on Good Morning America. And after some other bookstores heard about that, then they said, oh, now we want you on there.
Yeah, right. Oh, well, I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, she responded before anybody even knew who Steve
Oh,
Rogers.
wow. Thank
So
you.
it's
Well,
my pleasure.
I was truly impressed. I mean, the name of the book alone, and then when you read it, it's like, wow. Yeah.
Powerful with facts and everything. And if you
Yes.
reach out to me, I'll respond. It would be my pleasure to do another session with you.
Yes.
And I'll look forward to it, okay?
Okay, my last question, do you have a next book in the mix?
It's interesting. Yes, I do. That I've actually completed the manuscript and it's to come out in the fall. And the
Okay.
title of it is Successful Black Entrepreneurs Who Are Not Athletes or Entertainers.
Oh, God, I can't wait. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate having you. Ms. Ortiz, thank you for joining us. Tiffany, Mr. Harris, I can't see you, but thank you for joining us also. So we'll do this again in another 6 or 7 months, okay? Or maybe we'll wait till the next one come out and have you on. Yeah, why don't we do
Thank you very much.
All right.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Thank you. I
Thank you all
appreciate you.
again. Okay, bye-bye.